Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another not quite live edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Richard Ayotte, aka richayotte.tez, Tezos OG, baker, developer, and one of the liveliest voices in the Tezos ecosystem. On today's stream, we'll be giving away 25 Tez to one of our lucky viewers. If you'd like that lucky viewer to be you, keep an ear out for a keyword later on during the stream. Then comment with the keyword below this video where it's posted by the @TezosCommons account on X. Hi, Rich. Where are you right now, and how is the weather?
Hey, Stu. I'm in Niagara Falls, Canada, and we
Lovely.
got some nice clear skies, and it's a beautiful day.
Oh, lucky you. It's raining here in Vancouver. To get the ball rolling, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your personal journey into the exciting world of blockchain technology?
Yeah, I'm a software engineer, so I've been programming for about 25 years. And in around 2008, there was this financial crisis, and I saw that I lost a bunch of money in my mutual funds. So I decided to take a deep dive into money and find out what's going on here. So I discovered gold, and I thought, okay, this is interesting. And I followed some of the Milton Friedman and a lot of the people who were talking about finances from a different aspect than we were currently doing. So, and then discovered Bitcoin, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And decided I wanted to help out the community in whichever way I could. And this was like an endeavor that I thought, well, I'm not trying to make money. I just want to help the community get access to crypto. So I opened up I got a ATM going in my barber shop. So I got a conversation with my barber, and he's like, yeah, sure, you want to bring that in? So I did some programming, and I called it Bitcoin Barber. And that was the beginning that was my first purchase of Bitcoin and selling Bitcoin.
Is it still there?
No, it's not there anymore. I had plans to sell some Tez, but it became very busy. So a lot of this machine was selling out, and I was running through the machine and filling it up. So it was quite hectic, but quite successful. And it's probably the point at time where I wasn't trying to make money, but I ended up making a lot of money just by running this little ATM.
And how did you first come into contact with Tezos, and what was it about this ecosystem in particular that made you want to get involved?
Yes. So at the time, when I started this ATM, I was joining this. There was a Bitcoin meetup, and it's funny because there was only two of us that would show up at the meetup, and we'd have some coffee and donuts. And the other person that I worked with, John Garrett's, he was connected with some people who were working on Ethereum. So I started to mine Ethereum from day one. So that was pretty exciting, but I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was like, okay, this is like Bitcoin, but I'm mining. And then shortly after Ethereum launched, there was this DAO hack. And I thought, okay, this is a real problem. We're going to have how can we do something where smart contracts aren't so vulnerable to these attacks? So I was listening to a podcast with Arthur, an Epicenter podcast. And Arthur started to describe things that I thought were fascinating with formal verification and ensuring the secure contracts and upgrading and governance. And then I was totally hooked. And that was about a year before the ICO. So it was a lot of fun. I was like, okay, I got to get involved in Tezos now. Downloaded the source code, built the node, and started to participate in the test network at the time, like a year before the ICO. And that convinced me. Once I was able to run a node successfully, I thought, well, then I got to participate in this ICO. So that's the beginning.
So you truly are a Tezos OG.
Yeah.
And you it sounds like you started out running the node. Have you been involved with Tezos baking right from the very beginning?
Yeah, so from day one, I've been baking. At first, it was just personal. Just I didn't want to open up to the public. Didn't want to have that extra responsibility, but now I'm a public baker, so I've eventually decide to contribute a little bit more to the community and have something a little bit uh, some kind of service to build to help the ecosystem.
Fair enough. And for those who might be interested in delegating their Tez with you, what's your baker handle?
You can find me on Twitter. It's at Real Baked, and the bakery's called Baked. It's spelled with the phonetic letters, so BAKTZ.
Okay.
But the A has a dash on it for A, so it's Baked.
Just to make it as hard to find you as possible, eh?
That's the thing.
As someone who's, as you say, been baking since day one, do you have any tips for those who are newer to the Tezos baking game?
Join the communities. There's a baking Slack. That would be a good place to go to and ask questions. Go into the Discord. There's a few places there, and your questions will get answered. There's always someone there who's ready to help. Yeah, just get involved, get it running. There's a lot of software. It's matured. It's way easier than it was when it was 6 or 7 years ago. Get involved. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Okay. While we're on the subject, why is it important for Tez holders to delegate their Tez to someone like you who's baking?
Yeah, well, someone who is involved and who cares about the ecosystem, I think, is important because they have this vested interest. Unlike maybe something like an exchange where they're doing it more of a business, they don't really care that much, or they don't care as much as someone who's vested into the ecosystem. So I think it's important that way.
And if you're a relative Tezos noob and you're thinking about delegating your Tez and you want to identify, as you say, somebody who's involved and somebody who has a vested interest and somebody who's participating, how can they determine who that baker would be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess if the baker is participating in some kind of social forums or helping out in different, like let's say the baker Slack, you can see one of the bakers participating and helping others. That might be the kind of person that you want to delegate to. You can see that they're active and participating.
Yeah. I see. And speaking of participating, how many of Tezos's protocol upgrades have you personally voted on?
Yeah, so I personally voted on all of them. Yeah, so I look forward to them. I look forward to reading the upgrades and digging deep into them. And I've actually voted yay for all of them.
Very consistent. From the perspective of someone who, as you say, has participated in every Tezos protocol upgrade vote to date, how is the Tezos governance process functioning in 2024, and how has it functioned throughout the existence of Tezos?
I think it's functioning as designed. Like, we have some situations where there's people who disagree on the particular upgrade, and we've seen a few of them get turned down. So that to me is a good indication that things are working. There's not that much that I would change other than maybe try to incentivize people's involvement in looking into the protocols or looking into the changes that are coming up and voting on them. But it's a really difficult thing to do, to incentivize, because there's this game theory where people will vote for things that they don't really care for, or they're not going to actually put some thought into it. So yeah, but other than that, I think it's working well.
Okay. And what about the upgrades themselves? Like, what's your stance on how the ongoing evolution of the Tezos blockchain with all of these protocol upgrades, how that's progressing so far?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. The upgrades that we've had so far always bring scalability to the L1, bringing block times, smaller block times, and really looking at the ecosystem and seeing what other players are doing and bringing it into ours. And I think this is one of the Tezos' strength. we're doing rollups. We're doing it correctly. We're doing it properly, decentralized rollups. And we're going to see some pretty exciting stuff in 2024 with ultra high throughput Tezos 2.0
Tezos 2.0.
rollups. And I think these are great upgrades. The huge benefit to me is that we're not reinventing the wheel every single time when we need to upgrade. Where right now I'm looking at the ecosystem and somebody has a great idea. For example, Ethereum's looked at Bitcoin and thought, hey, let's reinvent Bitcoin because they don't want to accept our PRs. So Ethereum comes out and then suddenly says, oh, okay, well, Ethereum doesn't work. It doesn't scale. So let's create something new. Solana comes out. And so and then Solana's like, okay, well, somebody looks at Solana and says, well, that's not really modular and that's going to scale as well as if we did something else. So then Celestia comes out. So there's these new projects that all come out. But the problem with these projects is that they're all new again. And so you get this transfer of value between and split between these projects. Where Tezos, you get to keep all the work that was done initially, and you get the benefits of the new stuff. And I think that's going to be very powerful in the coming years as Tezos matures. And I think that's one of its biggest strengths. And it's not apparent until later on, where I think the new players are going to start to trip over their newness. So, for example, Solana was down a bunch of times. Well, it's because they had a new code base. Of course, you're going to have bugs and people, they experience downtime because of that. Yeah.
Okay. Also, I understand you've been involved with the Exodus wallet and its Tezos integration. Can you talk a little bit about Exodus and the work you're doing with their team at the moment?
Yeah, so I worked for Exodus for about 3 years, and it's a beautiful wallet. It's probably one of the best looking wallets for multi-asset wallets out there. But they weren't doing enough work for Tezos. So at first they did, when Tezos was fairly high in the coin market cap ranking, but then it kind of dropped, and so they want to. It's part of their business model. There's nothing to, it's part of a lot of these businesses. They look at who's in the top ranking, and so I decided to leave Exodus because I wanted to spend more time on Tezos. But as soon as I left, they called me back in to do some work. So I ended up doing some contract work for them and to do some of the Tezos Web3 integrations. So connecting to dApps and support for tokens and NFT gallery and all that sort of work. So that's what I've been working on for the last year.
Okay. Why are those kind of cross-chain integrations important to the ongoing growth and health of the Tezos ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the adoption, because you're tapping into a market where it's not within the Tezos bubble. So you have someone who has a multi-asset wallet, and if you have support for Tezos and you have a good support for Tezos in that wallet, then they might consider trying it out and seeing what the experience is. Maybe they'll have a good experience, discover the community. So in that way, I think it's good to have these multi-asset wallets with premium Tezos support.
Right on. Great stuff so far. I'm excited to ask you some more stuff. Before we get into the nitty gritty, are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Just before we do that, I'd like to announce today's keyword for the 25 Tez we're giving away today. Today's keyword is !Tezos. Enter the keyword !Tezos below this video on X, and Nightbot will randomly select today's winner, who will announce also in the comments below this video. Okay, now, Rich, it is lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers. This is just for fun, so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Yes.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs, but I have a cat.
Simpsons or Family Guy?
Simpsons.
Movies or video games?
Movies now, but it used to be video games.
Fair. Is this real life, or are we in a simulation?
It's real life. It's real life. I don't
Probably
know.
sounds like probably real life is your answer.
Probably.
True or false? Money buys happiness.
Uh, um, false.
Name one thing you absolutely want to do before you die.
Hmm. Huh. That's a good question. I don't know how to come up with an answer on that one. Before I die. We're gonna have to edit this part.
Sorry, I threw you there.
That's an interesting question. I probably have like 20 answers and 0 answers on that one.
Okay.
Let's see. Before I die, I would like to travel the world.
There you go. Perfect. The last place you traveled was?
It was Mexico. So Honduras. Yeah.
Right on. In 5 words or less, how would your best friend describe you?
Honest.
Okay. Just the one.
Just
Okay.
the one word. Let's see if he's.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fine. And finally, what is your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Watch a documentary or a movie.
Excellent. Thank you. Those were excellent answers. This concludes the TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. You've told us about what attracted you to Tezos and its ecosystem in the first place, and I'm curious. In a notoriously fickle space like that of blockchain technology, what is it that's kept you here?
I believe it's the possibly the ability to get rid of the noise because it's an ecosystem full of noise. So if you can put your noise canceling headphones on, you can hear this beautiful music, which is our community, uh, and that keeps me coming. So it's that music. You need to put the noise canceling headphones on, and you can hear the music.
And look for the music. Okay. I know. Speaking of the music, like I know you participated in the recent Tez Pole campaign that gained some serious social media traction for the Tezos ecosystem, and specifically its thriving art scene. For those who might not be familiar, can you talk a bit about the Tez Pole phenomenon and its origins?
Yeah, I mean, I was just a participant, and this thing just spurred on its own. And I think this is part of the beauty of what happens in Tezos land and in a decentralized system where you have this, grassroots thing that happens that is so super positive. So I saw a tweet, I think it might have been Violet, who posted something about Tez Pole, and I thought, let's participate in this. Let's turn lemons into lemonade. And by doing this is like I create my own little, Tez Pole picture and joined in the party, and it turned out to be a lot of fun.
Well, to wind it back a little bit, what was the Tez Pole in the first place?
Yeah, the Tez Pole was, well, there was an event in Miami where we're supposed to showcase the art from the artists, and the way it was set up wasn't ideal. It was on a pole with some monitors and some wires hanging off, and it didn't look very professional. And some people complained about that for probably good reason. I mean, it wasn't at the same standard that we're used to seeing, especially at Art Basel. So we started, let's see, how can we turn this bad thing into a good thing? And we kind of made fun of ourselves, but at the same time, we just like, hey, this is really cool.
Just embraced it and jumped in.
Exactly, embrace the Tez Pole. Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was a very interesting case of shifting the sentiment around a Tezos related story that we watched happen in real time. From your perspective, as somebody who was a part of that, like, how is this community able to come together and sort of make lemonade out of those lemons, like they did with Tez Pole.
I think it's just part of our culture, and this is part of the DNA of Tezos, and this is the kind of thing that keeps you around because you're like, that's the music that we're listening to, and I don't think there was anybody who had planned it out completely and said, hey, we're going to do this test. It just kind of grew on its own. And I think that's the beautiful part about this.
Right on. Obviously in a competitive marketplace like that of blockchain technology, like the social media sentiment surrounding a blockchain ecosystem like this one can be pretty important. For a chain like Tezos, which obviously has a lot going for it and a lot of positive developments to focus on, how can we generate more instances like Tez Pole that sort of move the sentiment needle the way that campaign did?
Yeah, I put some thought into this, and I think that there's a lot of focus right now on maybe a centralized way of thinking, which is let's use Twitter and try to promote on Twitter. But what we've learned, I think, with Tez Pole is that each person can actually contribute in their own way. And if everyone actually contributed in a more decentralized way, we probably could get quite a bit further ahead. For example, we can either sit and complain on Twitter that the price of the token is no good, which is not going to do much, or you can start a local meetup, start a local. Everybody can do something locally, and I think decentralizing the marketing of Tezos is probably a good way forward. I think this is kind of what we learned from Tez Pole. Everybody wants to participate. Some of them don't know how. Not everyone is an artist, so maybe some people are not able to participate in the Tez Pole creating these images. But I think that if we decentralize the marketing, which means everybody can do something locally, we can have the same sort of effect as Tez Pole, but by reaching out and talking to people. Even if your meetup only has 2 people in, which is how it started for me, just have coffee with someone and talk to them about Tezos.
Yeah,
you're just meeting in a coffee shop, and if everyone did that, we could have hundreds of meetups across the world.
Yeah, I like what you said there about having everybody can contribute something in a case like that where you sort of this thing happens, you present this opportunity like, hey, this is the meme, this is the Tezos meme of the moment, and people can create images to participate in that way. People can like and share those images. People can comment on those images, and it sort of has this snowball effect that got it to a really interesting place, right?
Yeah.
Obviously that's something that we would like to see more of in terms of, as I said, like moving that sentiment needle. What else would you like to see more of or less of in terms of the messaging about Tezos in the endeavor to keep that the sentiment trending in the right direction?
I think we've got the right culture in terms of participating it not only for the gains, which is something that exists in all the other ecosystems. So this is something unique, and I'd like to see that continue. Yeah. What was the second part about the question?
Just either things that you'd like to see more of,
yeah,
in the Tezos messaging, or things that you would like to see less of in terms of the Tezos messaging.
Yeah, I think that like the messaging, if it's coming from a central place, it's not really part of the decentralized culture and ideas. So if it's coming, let's say, just from the Tezos Foundation, here's how you're supposed to behave, it doesn't feel right to me. So I'd like to see less of that. But at the same time, I would like to see more of people getting involved locally. go and meet someone, go and start something else, go talk to somebody locally. That would be something that I'd like to see more of, because I think when we all join on Twitter or Slack or something like that, it is a nice centralized forum, but it also feels like a bubble. And so that's something that we need to get out of this bubble. So meeting people locally, I think, could help. And if we all do this locally, eventually it could be, we all do these local meetups, then we can probably have a serious effect on a global scale.
Okay. And if we're meeting people locally, and if we're making an effort to sort of spread the Tezos message locally, what is something that you would want those people to know that are outside the Tezos bubble? Like, what's something that you wish more people who aren't already involved in that they understood about the Tezos ecosystem?
Yeah. Well, to me, a decentralized or censorship-resistant blockchain is all about eliminating corruption. I mean, this is really the idea behind these things. We're trying to fight corruption, and I feel like Tezos is right there at the top for being the most anti-corrupt blockchain. And it's done because of the governance system, the way the ICO happened. It's all for those reasons that it is, corrupt resistance, I guess. But this is the battle that we're fighting, is corruption, and I think it's it's a great tool, and I think it'll have an effect, either in our governments or anything else that has power. Having a censorship-resistant blockchain is going to, help fight that corruption.
Could you speak a little bit more on that? When you're talking about blockchain as a tool, and more specifically Tezos as a tool to, as you say, fight corruption, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so corruption, what happens is that, well, if we look at the money that governments have control over, they can suddenly decide to go to war and print off a whole bunch of money and fight something that you might not agree with. And as soon as they're doing this, they are corrupt, because they're supposed to be helping you. They're supposed to be on your side. So the idea behind the blockchain is to remove that power so that they don't get corrupt, and remove the ability to corrupt the monetary system. And Tezos is an ideal system right now for doing that. And that's basically the reason why I'm fighting every day, and supporting Tezos and being involved. It's because I believe strongly, with a lot of conviction here, that this is the best way forward.
So fighting corruption in the monetary system is something near and dear to your heart.
Yes. Monetary and any other kind of power, like corrupt governments, it's just to keep them in check. So it's like a new system to keep power in check.
Okay. I know you talked a bit about this already, about having sort of decentralized marketing and messaging around Tezos as a positive thing, as you see it. And I'm curious, like, given the sort of disparate nature, the inherent disparate nature of given that it's global, and the communities behind blockchain ecosystems like this one are not necessarily very closely connected in a lot of ways. In this community in particular, like, how can we build a cohesive message that highlights things like what you just mentioned in a way that penetrates to folks outside of our ecosystem and inspires them to get involved?
That, I think, will emerge over time. In a decentralized world, people can go out and, have their own messaging. But I think that over time, you end up creating a culture that has, a coherent message. And I think it's there now. There's been a lot of fundamental or things that were done initially. For example, on the Reddit, the subreddit, there was this rule at first, which was no one's allowed to talk about price. Well, this is, you're creating it, you're setting the tone, you're creating a culture. You say, let's talk about something other than price. And for example, corruption. Let's talk about corruption and see how this tool can actually help that. And I think that's the cohesive message. I think it would be nice to, to get some feedback. So once people start to have meetups, bring that feedback back up and figure out what worked and what doesn't, and still join and have this central communication where we can discuss the ideas that have worked, and then bring that back and feed that back into the rest of the ecosystem.
It definitely feels like the elements are there, like that we've sort of got the rough outline of what that message is going to be, and it's just a matter of at this point of like refining it and getting it to a point where it's easy to explain to people, right?
Yeah, I feel like it would be great. This is one thing that would be really nice to have, is a cookie cutter system where if you want to start a meetup, here's a checklist of the things you need. Here's, we're going to have a mentor dedicated to you, and to start your first meetup, and just really handhold and get someone started. I think that would be really nice to have, centrally organized, but eventually have people take from that what they can and start. Because there's a lot of people who probably is like, I don't know how to start a meetup. What do I do? Where do I go? Who do I invite? Do I pay for the, for the donuts and the muffins? So
what's the ultimate goal of the Tezos ecosystem as you see it? Like, where is all of this headed?
I think that ultimately we're trying to create a censorship resistance transfer of value system. And I think that censorship resistance is because of corruption. And so it's corruption resistant. And I think that if we continue on our path, we're still doing great. Like, technology is there, and the community is there. So I think adoption is probably the thing that we need the most right now. There's not as many people who know about Tezos that I think could benefit from it. There are like millions of people who could benefit from this and who don't even know about it. So that's something that we need to work on. But the rest, all the other pieces are in place.
Okay. As someone who's been watching the Tezos community form and evolve right from the very beginning, what's one thing that surprised you about how that evolution has taken shape?
I think that there's not that much that has surprised me. There's not that much that surprised me. It's evolving pretty much the way that I thought. Other than maybe I was expecting to see more adoption, and that didn't happen. So, yeah, it's probably the only thing.
Okay. We've just come through a very interesting year for Tezos in 2023. What do you expect to see from the Tezos ecosystem in 2024? Like, do you have any predictions for the year ahead?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to see some pretty big technological improvements. What's happened is that Tezos was leading, and now everyone's catching up, and now it's trailing in a couple of areas. But I think we're going to leapfrog that in 2024 with extremely scalable blockchain. And I think there's some big players involved that are just waiting for that scalability. Some of these upgrades aren't just upgrades because no one requests them. There are people who are requesting for these features and upgrades, and I think they're big players. And we're going to find out who they are in 2024. And I think this is going to be the spark for some pretty major adoption. So I've got some high hopes for 2024 there.
That sounds pretty interesting. And what's next for Richard Ayotte? Do you have anything exciting coming up in your world?
I'm going to probably continue working on wallet related stuff. I'm not sure yet. This is actually up in the air, so I can't reveal too much, but I might be working on a Tezos only wallet very shortly.
Interesting.
Um, and also, I have Tezos Niagara domain registered, so I'm going to start that meetup that I've been talking about
Cool.
and get that going. So that's going to be 2024 for me, and get that community going.
And you can build as you go, you can build the meetup startup kit that you were describing.
That's right.
That
In
could
fact,
be
I mean, I'm a web developer. I'd love to be able to create this cookie cutter website so that people can launch their own website very quickly for their local meetup. Yeah.
sounds good to me. We could go on, but unfortunately, we're coming up to the end here. And before we close off, I'd like to remind our viewers that we're giving away 25 Tez today. To enter, just type the keyword !Tezos in the comments below this video on X. For those who miss out today, we remind you there are awesome giveaways to be found frequently here on the TezTalks live stream, so keep tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks, and we'd love to hear from you. Rich, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to a true Tezos OG like yourself, who's been working hard since day one to keep Tezos at the forefront of the Web3 revolution. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we sign off here?
No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me, and really enjoyed this. And yeah, it's been great.
Great stuff. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah.
To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on the TezTalks live stream. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Rich Ayotte, aka richayotte.tez. Now let's go shift that sentiment.
Awesome.